9 amazing stories of people who woke up from comas. 9. Sam Carter. In 2008, 60-year-old retired baker Sam Carter had fallen into a coma from severe anemia, which occurs when a person's red blood cell count gets too low or the blood lacks hemoglobin. In the hospital in Staffordshire, England, Carter had been in a coma for 3 days, and he was given a 30% chance of recovering. The doctor suggested to his wife that she should play some music for him. His wife got a set of headphones and put them on her husband, playing the Rolling Stones classic, "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." Amazingly, once the song was played, Sam opened his eyes. Sam says that the song gave him a new energy, and pulled him out of the coma. He doesn't remember much from the coma, but he remembered hearing that song. The song also had special meaning to him as it was the first single he ever bought when he was 17 years old. He said it gave him the push he needed to wake up. 8. Sarah Thompson. Indiana. Early 2012, 32-year-old Sarah Thompson got a blood clot on her brain and it ultimately led to her being in a coma for 10 days. When she awoke, she thought it was the year 1998. She thought that her favorite band, the Spice Girls, were still together, and she didn't know Michael Jackson was dead. More importantly, she didn't recognize her children or husband. In 1998, Thompson was 19 years old, had just given birth to her first son, and was still with her ex. So, when her children came in, she was expecting that her eldest would be a baby. Instead, he was 14 years old. She didn't even remember the other 2 children. As for her husband, she thought he was someone who worked at the hospital. 7. Ben McMahon, Sandra Rallick, and Michael Boatwright. Growing up in Australia, Ben McMahon learned French and Mandarin, but was never fluent in them. In 2012, he was in a car accident which left him comatose for a week. Doctors said he would be lucky if he survived. He beat the odds and woke up, but, oddly, he only spoke Mandarin and couldn't speak English. He could also write in Mandarin. Eventually, Ben regained the ability to speak English, but didn't lose the ability to speak Mandarin. As of September 2014, Ben is living in Shanghai where he attends school, but also gives walking tours of the city. In fact, his Mandarin is so good it impresses native speakers, and he is the host of a TV show in Shanghai. Finally, there is the amazing story of American Michael Boatwright. He woke up in a hospital bed in California speaking Swedish and claiming his name was actually Johan Ek. 6. Frederick Hirsch. Frederick Hirsch is a well-known, respected, and prolific contemporary jazz pianist who moved to New York in 1977 at the age of 21. In the early 90s, Hirsch went public about being diagnosed with AIDS in 2008. The disease wreaked havoc on Hirsch, and he contracted HIV dementia, but recovered from that. Then, in June, his blood oxygen levels became really low, and he went into septic shock. As each of his organs started failing, Hirsch fell into a coma. He was under for 2 months before he finally woke up. After that, he was on a feeding tube for 8 months. 5. Jared Carland. On August 16, 2009, 17-year-old Jared Carland and his best friend were in a car crash. His best friend was killed, and Carland went into a persistent vegetative state. Doctors said there was a very good chance that he would never wake up. Carland underwent therapy, and part of that therapy was listening to music. In the care center where Carland stayed, the other patients listened to soft and gentle music, but Jared's parents blared country music legend Charlie Daniels, specifically his classic song "The Devil Went Down to Georgia." After lying in a coma for 4 months, his parents got a reaction from that song, and eventually Jared came out of his coma. 6 months later, at the Riverbend Music Festival in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Jared got to meet the man who helped him while he was in his coma, Charlie Daniels. Jared's family says that they expect him to make a full recovery. 4. Jan Grzycki. In 1988, while working on the railroad, Jan Grzycki received head injuries while trying to connect 2 railroad cars. According to a report coming out of his home in Gildało, Poland, he was in a coma for 19 years. His wife tenderly moved him every hour so he would not get bed sores. Then, he woke up, and the world was completely new to him. Poland was no longer a communist country and he had to be introduced to his 11 grandchildren. The story was picked up by news organizations around the world, including the Associated Press and the BBC. It's interesting because his story was already pretty amazing. He woke up from a coma after 4 years, then had 11 more years of being paralyzed and mute. He was finally talking and even learning to walk. When the reporter who broke the story was asked about the inaccuracies, she said her version of the story was correct. Also, she said that there are different types of comas, including ones where people stay asleep and ones where they wake up sometimes. Grozybski's doctor confirmed Grozybski's descriptions of his disabilities. 3. Gary Dockery. Gary Dockery was 33 years old when he was one of 2 officers from the Walden, Tennessee Police Department called to a domestic disturbance on September 17, 1988. When he approached the house, he was shot once in the head. The other officer did CPR and called an ambulance. Medics got him to the hospital, and doctors were forced to perform a surgery that removed 20% of his brain. However, it was too risky to remove the bullet or the skull fragments. Dockery lay in a vegetative state for over 7 years. Over the next 18 hours, he talked to his family, whom he recognized. He recognized his sons, who were 13 years old and 5 years old when he went into the coma, who had aged to 20 years old and 12 years old when he woke up. He remembered things from his past, like the names of his horses, and he remembered camping trips. In fact, he was looking forward to going on the annual camping trip next year. He didn't remember the shooting, and wasn't aware of how much time had passed. 2. Sarah Scantlin. In 1984, Sarah Scantlin was a vivacious 18-year-old college freshman who had an incredible lust for life. Popular and attractive, Sarah had many friends, and she was the leader of her dance group in college. On September 21, Sarah was leaving a bar in Hutchinson, Kansas and, while crossing the road, a car hit her, knocking her into incoming traffic. The driver, who was drunk, fled the scene without stopping. Her skull was crushed when a second car hit her, but she was still alive. She was taken to the hospital, and her head injuries were extensive. The only thing she could do on her own was breathe. She was in a coma for a month. Her parents chose to keep her alive, even being told that she would probably never wake up again. Sarah was moved into a nursing home in April 1985. 1. Terry Wallace. In July 1984, 19-year-old Terry Wallace and his friend were in a horrible car crash when the car plunged into a creek. His friend was killed and Terry, who was found the next day, was left in a coma. His family, including his wife and 6-week-old daughter, took care of him as the world continued on for 19 years. Wallace was left paralyzed from the crash, but talks fairly coherently and in full sentences. Doctors are unsure why he woke up, but he has been studied quite a bit because of his unique story. Doctors believe that over the 19 years, Terry's brain essentially rewired itself. Once there were enough connections, it made his brain wake up. Make sure subscribe this channel.